Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Eckmann of Gold Derby, and here with me is Dan Perry and Jason Docherty, nominated for Outstanding Prosthetic Makeup for The Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power. Congratulations to both of you. This is your first ever Emmy nomination, both of you. How did this feel to see your name on the list of nominees?
You want to go first, Dan?
Yeah, speaking for myself, yeah, it's an amazing honor, and it was quite the surprise. Yeah, that came out of the blue, and first thing in the morning, very early in the morning, opened up my emails on the way to work, and yeah, congratulations. So it was, yeah, quite the surprise, and a great surprise. Yeah, it was, yeah, really humbled and honored. Yeah, it's really amazing.
Yeah, coincidentally, it was actually Dan that sent me a message because it was so early in the morning. Dan flicked me a text and actually woke me up and said, "Dude, you better check your emails." So I'm sort of on there, sort of half asleep as you are when you first get up, and I'm looking at my emails and I'm like, "Oh wow, okay, didn't expect that." So pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's right.
Pretty humbling and pretty amazing. So it's cool.
Yes, well, it's very well deserved. And you both are nominated specifically for the episode Adar. And I would say in terms of prosthetics, probably the bulk of your work there in that episode is creating these very gruesome orcs. And I was thinking about it, it's interesting, this show exists as its own entity, right? But we have seen orcs before in the main trilogy by Peter Jackson. And Dan, you even worked on that trilogy. So how do you contend when you have to make orcs here for something else? How do you contend with sort of the legacy of this franchise? Where do you start with concepts? Do you pull from that? Do you ignore that?
Obviously, yeah. Well, I'll go for a little bit, Dan.
No, yeah,
obviously
go for it,
I came on. I was on pretty early on as a designer, and then right from the get-go, I guess we decided that it was really important to acknowledge, honor, and draw from what's been done in the past. But both Dan and I worked on the original movies and The Hobbit, so we've spent a lot of our lives in Middle Earth, so it was know it quite well. So it was quite exciting that the showrunners were actually very much on board with sort of honoring that look. We weren't going too far away from what we'd created in the past. So from a design point of view, it sort of gave us quite a bit of freedom. And then after that, most of it for me, and then as it rolled on to Dan, was just about materiality and individual design of each of the characters. Anything to throw in there, Dan?
Yeah, well said. No, yeah. Yeah, like Jason said, it was yeah, I mean, obviously the original films were, we had this huge we had to get up to that level of, so to speak, of those beautiful makeups that funny enough that we did on the original films. But they also wanted to do something different, and just to step away from that and create their own world, so to speak. So yeah, for the design work and all the work that and Jason and Weta Workshop had done, it was amazing. We felt truly honored putting on those makeups every day, because they were just so beautiful and flawless, and you only made you want to make them the best that they could be, just by what you were receiving every day. And we just did our best to try and make them as beautiful as we possibly could.
Yeah, well, you mentioned this specific world, and I really appreciated the way that there is a lot of visual storytelling here about the world of the orcs, the culture of the orcs. There's, you can see differences. If someone maybe is a leader in this orc camp, they have distinctive markings. They might have a headdress, a headpiece. They may stand taller. How did you get to that point? I imagine that's a collaboration between many design departments, but can you just talk about that process of creating the kind of culture behind them?
It's like you said, Sam. It's very collaborative across the departments. We were very fortunate, I guess, to be able to collaborate very early on with Kate in costume and Jason and Ron through the VFX department. So there was a lot of design crossover as to how these creatures should look, and then how their culture works. Because this show has delved more into, I guess, the backstory or the culture of these characters. It's you know, they're not just, and I'm not saying they were before, but they're less fodder, more character. So there was a lot of that, a lot of those considerations were made. And we also you know, had to get into where have they been, where are they coming from, you know. They've been living under the ground. There was all these different ethoses that we had to sort of incorporate into it, and different types of orcs, which, I mean, it's not entirely obvious in the show, and I make the assumption that it will carry on later, that we'll learn more and more about the different types of orcs and the different hierarchies within the orcs. There was nothing really specific based around size necessarily. I mean, one of the main orcs in the show, and in this episode in particular, played by Luke Hawker, he's actually quite a small orc, but it doesn't take away from the fact that he's, you know, he's in charge and he's the tough guy, you know. So there's a lot of sort of stuff, a lot of layers like that are happening for sure.
Yeah. Well, how much extra time and work does that add on when, because, you know, some series, if there's a sort of fantastical race, then they might all sort of look the same. These guys really, everyone is individualized. What is that process like? It must add so much time, I would think, to create all these individual characters.
Oh, 100% it does. Yeah. I mean, like, obviously they're all going on different people, and you have X amount of people that will be wearing what we call a prosthetic appliance makeup, which Dan's team are applying every day. And then we have the background and midground that is filled out full of people in masks, which is, you know, pullover type assets. There was a lot of consideration had to be given to the fact that we had to create as much variety as possible without actually having to create, you know, hundreds of completely different assets. So there was a lot of that sort of stuff going on. A lot of it's done with color and so on and so forth. But all the makeups, the appliance makeups specifically, or the prosthetic makeups, they're all very individual. They're custom made for each person. And then obviously the trick there is to cast people that are all slightly different. I mean, so we were very conscious of that in the casting. We'd get a look in as designers, we get a look in on who they're looking at. We can make our recommendations around facial types and so on and so forth, body types, so that we can create that variety of characters. 100%.
Yeah. And I think, you know, it's one thing for prosthetics to create a piece that looks good in a mid shot or a wide shot, but there are so many, you know, these characters have to be really emotive in a close-up. And I think your work really allows the actors to pop. How do you get to that point? How do you get that articulation in a prosthetic?
I mean, and Dan will be able to, Dan should jump in here as well. But I mean, there's certainly from a design point of view, manufacture point of view, it comes down to materiality, the actual mechanical design of something over and above the aesthetic design, and incorporating the two. So, you know, the appliance will be thinner here or thicker here, and to allow more movement, less movement. The materials that these prosthetics are made of can be run in different densities. So some are softer, some are harder. So depending on what part of the person you're talking about, whether it's the piece that covers the head or the ears versus the chin or cheeks, things are going to be softer or firmer to allow better movement. And it's about directing movement as well. A lot of consideration when we create these as a sculpture is put into where we're putting wrinkle lines and so on and so forth to actually direct the movement into that spot, so we don't create something, unintentionally wrong. And then after that, a lot of it comes down to how they're applied on set. And sometimes, what do we need to change? It's like Dan may be able to jump in here on this, but this is not working. Can we make this softer, or can we change this? It's that sort of stuff that we work together with the materiality and the design to make it work.
Yeah, absolutely. Each makeup's really individualized to the performer, where it be fitting wise or material wise or softness wise, but also coloration and paint patterns, even right down to the number of freckles and moles and scars and everything that they have on their faces. So, and I was quite keen to keep the performers with their team, so they'd have artists that they were would apply their makeup on a daily basis, and I was quite keen to keep the same people doing the applications on those performers every time they're in the makeup, so they not only get a accustomed to putting on the makeup, but they get a rapport with the actor, and it always just ends up flowing so much easier. With that becomes you start to streamline the process, and you get better in doing it every time, and it starts to look sharper and sharper and sharper as it goes along. So it's a real collaborative effort on all parts. It starts from the very meeting of the actor and performer, all the way from the sculpting right down to the mold making, casting of the appliances, and then down to the application, painting, finishing, and then even standby on set. So it is quite a process and a journey to get that character onto screen, and there's so many different stages involved with that, and when it flows right, and the results usually hopefully speak for themselves on screen.
Yeah. How long would you say it takes to apply all that for an actor?
We had anywhere from like 2.5 hours to 3.5, 4 hours even on the bigger builds. I mean, some appliances or some makeup had more appliances, and when I say appliances, they're individually fit to the performer's face, like kind of like a custom made jigsaw puzzle. They kind of all fit together and they all blend together. So some of them had more pieces than others, which kind of streamlined the process. But yeah, anywhere from 2.5 to 4 hours, depending on the artist and the complexity of the makeups, or the paint job. Some paint jobs were more elaborate than others. But yeah, so yeah, they're in the chair a good good few hours, and then of course they have to wear it for the whole day, and then again, and at the end of the day, they have another hour taking it all off again, because it has to be taken off little bit by little bit, painstakingly, gently with removers, so they don't damage the actor's skin, so you can preserve their skin, their delicate skin, and put it on again the next day. So yeah, you have to be very careful.
Yeah. And there's also a really great character, Adar, who's the title character of the episode, who fans, I think, immediately latched onto because he's someone invented for this series, which is exciting, because it's kind of a blank slate, and he has all of this really gruesome scarring on his face. What was the kind of concept, the jumping off point for the look of that character?
I mean, from a design point of view, there was a lot of different things that went on with that character, and the actual makeup that you see on the film went through a lot of, on the show, went through a lot of iteration, a lot of changes. It shifted a lot from what we originally designed to what was finally applied by Dan and his team on set, and that was just due to everyone being in agreement and getting the best possible look for that character, and giving him something to really perform in. He's a very emotive actor, so it was really important that we didn't restrict his movement. I mean, and Dan, because Dan actually applied this makeup, Dan can sort of jump in here and give you more on it. But yeah, certainly from a design point of view, it was very irritative. There was a lot of iteration, of what we were doing, and to the point that we even made multiple versions of the makeup that were sent to Dan and the team to apply, so that they had different options to get with what we to get the final result, which you see in the show.
Yeah, absolutely, Jace. It was such a complex character. It had, and it was somewhat creative, especially for the TV series. Joseph, who wore the makeup, was such an amazing performer, and he wanted to emote so much through his face. The anguish and the pain and the torture and torment, and the original makeup that we had just didn't allow him to do that. It was beautiful makeup. There's nothing against the makeup, but it was just so restricting in a way that he couldn't emote those feelings and emotions through his face, which he really wanted to do. So we had to, like Jason said, go back to, taking it back, going back to the drawing board and refining it, and just coming to some agreement with, the powers that be and Joseph of what the final makeup should look like. So we had a good few tests before we arrived at something that was going to work. 1 for us, 2 for Joseph, and 3 for the powers that be, Amazon. And the scarring and that all came around very quickly. I mean, we had literally what we call Bondo transfer molds on the station, and we're like, let's try this. And we would literally just try it on the makeup test days and seeing if, this would work. And we made this patchwork of what we call Bondo transfer scars on the side of his face. And yeah, he had quite an elaborate sort of paint job underneath his wig, and you could sort of see through and see all the sort of spots and the orkiness coming out. So yeah, he was quite a challenge. Yeah, he was challenged, but it was fun makeup to do. Absolutely.
It's often the makeups that can look simpler, I guess. Like, I mean, he looks like he's a much more sort of streamlined, simpler looking character than, say, some of the other orcs, but they're often the makeups that are that much more complex, because you've got so much more that you have to put in there, and that you have to think about before you actually get in there, and especially when you start getting into a lot of dialogue and a lot of emotion from the actor, it's really important not to restrict that person. I mean, a lot of the limitations with shows like this is that we weren't able to get Joseph until pretty close to him being required to shoot. So he flew out from the UK out to New Zealand. I had a brief meeting with him. We were already well and truly into manufacture. We talked about a few different things, and then he was pretty much up to Auckland and ready to start testing. And this is when, obviously Dan's talking about all the tests they had to do. But it's really important to, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's important to acknowledge that sometimes the simpler makeups are actually the more complex makeups.
Absolutely. Yeah, well said. Yeah, well said.
A very good point. Well, some wonderful simple makeups and complex makeups in this series. So thank you both for joining me. Congratulations on your Emmy nomination. For everyone who's out there watching, make sure you subscribe and stick with us here at Gold Derby for the rest of this season. And Dan and Jason, thank you so much.
Thanks, Sam. Cheers.